Hey everyone, it's Nick and Chelsea Jerusalem here with the
Hello.
Jerusalem's Happy Home team and talking about the riveting topic of home inspections.
Woo!
Specifically, how does it work when you are a buyer who's purchasing a home, and what does that negotiation process look like as part of your home purchase? And so we have another video where Chelsea interviewed one of our home inspectors and went into great detail about what all is covered in that inspection process. Just kind of a super quick summary is that once you have an offer accepted, typically the default time is 10 days to have your inspection completed. The inspection usually will take between 2 to 4 hours, depending on how big the property is,
How old it is.
yeah, if it's a little one-bedroom condo versus a 4,000 square foot home that's 100 years old. The cost is also typically around $400 to $500. That is a buyer expense. That again also kind of varies depending on the scope. But so let's say we now fast forward to we have the home inspection report in our hot little hands,
Okay.
and we're ready to formulate our response and go back to the seller. So how does that work, Chelsea?
Okay, so we've got the inspection in hand. As soon as we have the report available, I review the report with my client and figure out is there anything that we're concerned about. Say we've got a beautiful home and the seller was very meticulous at maintaining it and there's nothing we want fixed. We just like it the way it is. We're good to go. We can check that box, sign off and say, hey, inspection satisfied, moving on to the next step. So that would be ideal for everybody, but oftentimes that's not the case. So we usually almost always find something wrong with the house, even in a brand new house. But if we do find something that is of concern, you can ask for a credit towards repairing it yourself. So you could say, hey, I'm super handy. I know exactly what this repair entails. I feel comfortable doing it myself, and it probably would actually cost me less money to do it myself. So it'll be beneficial to the seller and me to know that I'm getting it done the right way and I feel good about doing it that way. So sometimes a credit is a good option for the more handy buyer, or say, your uncle is, in the construction industry and you're going to have somebody that can help you. Usually the credit isn't like ideal for the buyer, but it can definitely work for the right buyer.
Okay.
And then if the house is just so torn up that you don't want anything to do with it anymore, and oh my gosh, everything's rotten and everything's just bad, everything was done wrong, I don't want it.
Had a
You
few
can
of those. Yeah.
check that box too. There's a box that says, heck no, I'm out of here. And then your earnest money will get refunded to you. So that's the deposit you put down up front to get the seller to honor your contract. And so as soon as you go mutual acceptance on a contract, a deposit may exchange hands, the earnest money deposit, but that would come back to you if you had an inspection contingency and the house was just too funky. And then last but not least, we can also negotiate for repairs, and that's generally what I recommend we do when it's my buyer. That way we know the house is all fixed and ready to go, so when they move in, they're not moving into something that needs repairs right away. And I always make sure when we do a repair request that we make sure it's a very, very clear, detailed request, and that we're asking for a licensed and bonded contractor to do the work with receipts provided prior to closing. So we have receipts, we know the work was all done by a licensed and bonded contractor, and that way the work is warranted by that contractor, so the seller is not having to warranty that work, because once they sell the house, they're gone. But you still have those contractors to make sure that they did the job right. So that's the way I would generally want it to work for my buyer.
Okay. What happens if, like, say, they discover other issues when they're doing a repair or something? How does that handled?
So say, for example, we were doing, during the inspection, we found out there was some moisture in the floor around the toilet. Usually that means there's something wrong with the wax ring. So I would say, hey, we need to pull this toilet, investigate. So have licensed and bonded plumber do investigation, check and see what's wrong with this issue that's getting water into the floor, and then repair any related damage and make sure it's all done to code. So that's all part of my request, is that they're going to fix any related damage. I just make sure that way. It's also part of why we want to make sure that it's done by the seller and not the buyer, because sometimes when you start to dig into a repair that may be seemingly simple, you pull that toilet out and you can find that there's a whole lot more going on that needs to be fixed. And it's a lot better when that can of worms gets opened when the seller still owns the house than the day after you get keys and you're trying to flush your toilet.
Right. And then once the seller gets the report back or the request rather, from the buyer, the seller then, by the default timeline, is 3 days to then formulate their response. response. So a seller might say, okay, I'm going to do all of your requests, or hey, I'm not going to do these repairs, but instead I will give you a credit. Or they could say, we're not doing anything, buy it as is, and then that kicks the ball back into the buyer's court, and then you have, everybody has a combined 3 additional days to come to a mutual agreement.
Yeah, so this 3-day timeline doesn't just keep on going indefinitely. We've got the first, we hit our response, the buyer's response goes out, and the seller has typically the 3 days to review and respond to that, and then we have a final 3-day period of time where we either need to agree or disagree and move on. So at the end of that final 3 days, we need to like figure out a solution or realize that we're not going to find one and it's time to walk away. I don't like walking away. So if there's a way to make it work, we're going to find it.
Yeah, and then once, like, is there any process to basically make sure all the work's done, or like a walkthrough, or how does that part work to make sure they actually did what they're supposed to do?
There is. So the contract, whether you do an inspection or not, always allows for a walkthrough prior to closing to occur, and I always suggest that you do that walkthrough. That you do that walkthrough because things can happen in between the time you look at it originally and the time you close. You want to make sure the seller didn't just throw a party and go crazy in there and things are not the way you expect them to be. So checking on the seller right before you move out, they move out, is a good way of making sure everything is the way you expect it to be, and also that the repairs are all the way you expected them to be. So we'll have the receipts in hand, and we'll be able to walk through and be like, yep, check, water heater looks the way it's supposed to, furnace has been serviced, everything looks great.
Yeah, so as you can tell, Chelsea's done this a time or two. She is our inspection guru, probably has been through over 1,000 inspections, could probably build a home herself, and so always in good hands there. But if you ever have any questions about the home buying or home selling process, call, text, visit us online. You can find us at happyhometeam.com. happyhometeam.com.